In 2016, Michaels acquired the Hancock Fabrics brand name. This included all of their private labels and also the customer database. Though Michaels did acquire the Hancock Fabrics brand, they never did carry fabric in the overwhelming majority of their stores. Instead, what they did was to offer the fabrics available for sale online. This leads many to wonder whether or not Michaels will take a different course of action now that they have acquired the intellectual property and private label brands of Joann. Today, I visited two different Michaels brick and mortar locations so that we could speculate about where they may fit the Joann fabric items inside the store if they ever so chose to do so. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. At the front of every Michaels, there is a classroom, and this classroom supposedly hosts birthday parties and offers courses. According to a Michaels employee, only Michaels employees can do courses. But I haven't seen any courses or birthday parties take place at a Michaels since the lockdowns of 2020, so I have no idea how this space is currently being utilized, as I have not seen it ever being used. Please let me know down in the comment section below if you've ever seen this space used, but I know I certainly have not. If they weren't going to use this space for its intended purpose, then why not cut fabric there? But that is just my thoughts. And I know that it would be excellent if they actually did do classes and host birthday parties, but who knows if they will ever have enough staffing to be able to do that. This first location has a floral and seasonal section that pretty much takes up half of the entire store. I am pretty sure that Michaels has taken into consideration what sales that they get most, and that pretty much tailors what they decide to include in store. So I would assume that at this location there are a lot of sales of flowers, but for me personally, I do not see the use in having that many flowers inside of a store, because you can get fake flowers from pretty much anywhere, and a lot of that space could be used for fabric or yarn. I didn't picture it much before, but front and center when you first walk in the store is a bunch of seasonal items. Right now, they have a bunch of those tumblers and pool noodles and things for around the pool. As a former retail employee, I do know that you place impulse buy items at front of store and all the items that people typically need at the back, so that they have to walk all the way to the back to get what they need. But I don't really think that the seasonal items are a good thing to place in front of store, because that was one of the major downfalls of Joann Fabrics. Honestly, I think that it would make more sense to put something like the amigurumi kits at the very front of the store, because that is an item that is craft related, but you don't typically come to the craft store specifically for an amigurumi kit. Instead, you come there for yarn, and the amigurumi kit is something cute that you find as an afterthought. I'm going to kind of speed up through this section and not really say much here, because there's just the run-of-the-mill things that you normally find inside of Michaels, which would be your storage, your paper crafts, your vinyl, your baking supplies, and then your art section. If you haven't already, please do give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and tap that notification bell to receive updates. By the way, I think that the art supplies section has some really cute boxes for storing sewing notions. However, the prices were a bit high, so I would definitely utilize the coupons. The framing portion of the Michaels store took up pretty much a quarter of the entire store, and they also had a huge table in framing. So I would assume that framing is Michael's biggest money maker, just because of how many frames that they had and how much space that they allowed for framing to take up inside of their store. Online, I heard some people joking that they would use the framing table for cutting fabric. And if I were an employee and they actually decided to do that, I would turn in my resignation, because framing always has a lot going on back there, and there's just not enough space to cut out fabric on the framing desk. Behind framing, there are a few aisles worth of yarn, and I am incredibly surprised by how small the area is for the yarn selection because after 2020, there was a huge increase in the amount of people who enjoy to knit and crochet, especially amongst the Gen Y and Z generation. So it would make more sense for them to actually increase the amount of yarn instead of having such a small space for it. It's worth noting here that those 3 or 4 aisles worth of yarn are the only aisles of yarn in the store. Once you hit that back wall there, that is all sewing supplies, and that is the only space where they have sewing supplies. And once you turn that corner, there's nothing there except for a few art supplies and a wall. So there's no further place for them to expand. Now they could take away those art supplies and put a little bit of yarn there, but it wouldn't be enough space to be able to put as many yarn supplies as what it says online that they would be offering. Online, it says that Michaels acquired 60 loops and threads offerings in addition to the Big Twist line. And it also says that they plan on expanding with Red Heart, Bernard, and Lion brand yarns, which they already do carry in the store, but it says online that they will be carrying more. So if they were to add more yarn at this particular store location, they will really need to relocate the aisle or to move away some of the other offerings that they have in the store in order to fit more yarn inside of the store. Michaels has been carrying Singer sewing machines for a few years now, but in the press release, it says that they will now even have Brothers sewing machines along with the Aliso Smart Iron. What's really important to understand here is that brick and mortar stores typically don't make money off of their branded items. So if Michaels were to carry a Brothers sewing machine, they wouldn't be making a profit off of the Brothers sewing machine, but rather that Brothers sewing machine would drive traffic to the store, and then Michaels could make income off of their private label branded items that they upsell the customer on to go with that Brother sewing machine. I just wanted to show you the sewing aisle from this angle so that you could see how small it truly is. I don't necessarily see them enlarging the sewing section by that much because there are far more people who knit and crochet than there are those who actually sew, because knitting and crocheting are just more accessible to people because all you need is a needle, a hook, and some yarn, and you're in business. Whereas with sewing, you typically need a sewing machine and a dedicated space. Now online it says that Michaels is going to be offering peel-on stabilizer and additions to their Clover Fiskars, Coat and Clark, and Velcro section. Now, I think that that all could be added to this small little section here if they place the pegs correctly. It also says that they're going to be offering cut to order batting, but I don't foresee them offering that in store. Instead, I see them offering that as a service online, and that you can come and pick up the batting in store, because otherwise you would need a cutting table on site and also hire staff to be able to cut that out. We're not going to go over any more of what's inside of the store because what's on that right side is just woodworking supplies, kids' toys, t-shirts, and jewelry making supplies. I think that the yarn section would really need to move in order to expand it larger than what it is now. It would really need to move somewhere like to where the flowers and seasonal items are. And then those seasonal items will probably need to move to the back and be a much smaller section than what it is now in order to really increase the size of the yarn section. And then two, some of those sewing supplies could go in that section as well, and that would also expand that area. But I'm not so sure that they will actually do that. Only time will tell. Now let's go ahead and look at the second store, and I'm not going to spend as much time there, but what I will do is show you the yarn and sewing sections so that you can see what that is looking like in comparison to the other store. Now, at the front of this store, they have their jewelry making supplies there instead of seasonal items. And I think that is a wiser choice to put that right there in the front than it is just to have seasonal items there. The other difference that I saw was that this particular store location has an entire aisle filled with trim, and I think that some of the other stores might expand in that way as well, though I'm not sure how much trim one single person could use in a trip to Michael's. This store has a teeny tiny little display of Coats and Clark thread. How cute. But I hope that they will expand that in the future because that's just not enough thread. For me personally, I prefer Gutermann thread, but they don't carry it at Michael's, so that's a bummer for me. They do have a slightly larger yarn area inside of this store, and it is located next to framing, just as many Michael's have done. And at the very back of the store, they have the hooks and needles that you would need for crochet or knitting instead of having the sewing supplies there. But the problem is there is a bathroom right next to that area, and it doesn't necessarily smell the best. There is an entire aisle filled with sewing notions, and that is a lot more sewing notions there than what they had at the other store location. But the number one thing that I wanted to show you here is that on the back wall, instead of having art supplies, they do have some fabric. And this fabric is just a bunch of pre-cut fat quarters. And that's what I would assume that most Michael's locations will carry in store. I don't necessarily think that they will carry fabric that has to be cut out, because then you would need a table and a store associate to be able to manage that section. And I think that would be just too much work for Michael's. So I don't think that they would ever do that, but I could be wrong. So let me show you a little image here. And this is the store makeup of this second store location. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the stores as I visualized it. Small disclaimer, this might not be totally accurate, but it's just the way that my eyeball saw it. Store number 2 appears to have slightly more flowers in home decor than store number 1 even had, and maybe that's because they make more sales in that area. Who knows? But what I do know is that the framing department appears to be roughly the same size as the yarn section inside of store number 2. So it could be that store number 1 could reduce the size of the framing department to make more room for yarn, but I don't know that they would do that if framing is their biggest moneymaker. So as a whole, I think that Michael's will indeed start carrying more yarn, but I don't really foresee them carrying a ton of more fabric simply because it's a smaller demographic of people that actually sew. But what do you all think? Do you think that Michael's will start carrying more bolts of fabric in select locations, or do you think that they will only carry pre-cuts? Please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, as I'd love to hear from you. I thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.